welcome to YMB Movie Talk from your movie blogger. My name is Simon Mansell, and I'm so happy that you decided to join me today for the 12th episode of my podcast. But this isn't any ordinary podcast. On this podcast, it's more of, let's say a special type of podcast. And my normal format for my podcast is going through the movie news of the last few days. So I'll talk about recent movie news, talk about upcoming films, talk about recent castings, things like that. On this episode of my podcast, it's going to be a little bit different because we are going to be going through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is going to be a task. So I'm not going to be reviewing every single MCU film in this podcast because that would literally be impossible. That would be impossible to do. I could not do that. Like, I mean, how many films is there? Like over 20-something films. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that on a podcast. Like, on one episode. Like, I try to keep my podcast between like an hour and an hour and a half long. Any more than that, I kind of feel like it drags a little bit. Unless it's like a really different, like if there's a lot of movie news for that time, say for something like, I don't know, if it was like D23 or DC Fandom or Warner Brothers announced loads of films coming out, or there was like a film I really wanted to get in depth in, then I probably would do it longer. It just depends. It depends on the situation. But for this, I'm basically, the way I'm going to structure this is, this is going to be split into 3 episodes. So the first episode of this special series I'm doing for my podcast will be focused on Phase 1. The second one will be focused on Phase 2 and so on and so forth. This is just going to be strictly for the films. I'm not going to be going into the TV series, any kind of spin-off one-shot short films like All Hail the King, or like a funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer, The Consultant, things like that. I'm not going to be getting into those because even though they are technically canon, well, some of them are canon, some of them aren't. That I won't be focusing on that. I'll just be focusing on the main films in the MCU. So basically starting off with Iron Man and then ending with the most recent release, which was Spider-Man Far From Home. Unless, when does Black Widow come out? I think Black Widow comes out in like July, so we would have done this by then anyway. So we'll be going up to Spider-Man Far From Home. I've never talked about the MCU films in depth on the podcast. The only one I kind of went into a little bit was The Incredible Hulk, when Ed Norton kind of eventually spoke up about what happened with his involvement with that Hulk film from 2008. That was the only time I've really talked about any MCU film. I haven't really talked about anything else, really. I've talked about WandaVision, but like from the films, I've never really gone into depth on them on a podcast. I reviewed them all on my old website, but I've never really gone into depth of them, like just talking about them in front of a camera on a podcast. So before we start, guys, talking about the MCU films, if you're watching this on YouTube, which I'm guessing most people are watching it on YouTube, but if you are watching it on YouTube, you can find the links down below to my SoundCloud and my Spotify account, in case you wanted to listen to like an audio version. If you're listening on your phone, you wanted to save your data or something like that, you can go onto my Spotify, my SoundCloud, and you can listen to my podcast on there. That's just going to be like an audio-only version. So if you want to go on there, the links will be in the description for that. So if you want to go and follow my Spotify and my SoundCloud, that'd be great if you could do that. And also, how I put in clips up on YouTube, I won't be doing that for SoundCloud and Spotify. SoundCloud and Spotify, I'll just be putting the full episodes on there, so it won't be the clips and stuff like that, but it'll just be the main episodes of my podcast. But like I said, I'll put the links in down below if you want to go and check those out. That would be really, really, really appreciated if you could do that. And if you do like what I do and that, just share it around. I've set up a Facebook page now as well. I'll put that in the link down below if you want to go and like that. And yeah, guys, just show some support. Just a little thing, a little like, a little subscribe on YouTube. Hit the notification bell as well. That will notify you whenever I do any new content as well, so you get to keep up to date with with the world of film and anything that I'm doing with my podcast. So with all that jibber jabber out the way, let's get into talking about the MCU. I'm so excited to do this. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really excited to do this. I love the MCU films. I'm not going to say they're all the greatest films in the world, because they're not, but they are one of the best, probably the second or third best franchise for me personally. Number one is Harry Potter. It always will be, always has been. It'll never be topped in my opinion, for me personally. Second probably might be Rocky, and then it'd be the MCU. So it's a very tough competition up there for me. But Harry Potter and Rocky for me are more kind of personal. The stories behind why I love those films so much that go into like my family and all this stuff. It's a long story. So, but for the just for the joy of film and the entertainment aspect, I don't think any film series ever has kind of hit the heights of the MCU. But I'll kind of give a more broad recap when we finish talking about all the films. Starting off, the first film that I'll be reviewing from the MCU is obviously the film that started it all. That is 2008's Iron Man. 2008's Iron Man is a very interesting story. Basically, the film was owned by, I think, Universal for years and years and years. It was a film that they tried to get off from the ground, and it never kind of happened. It never, for some reason, it didn't happen. And the stars never aligned for this film to happen. The rights then reverted back to Marvel due to them not making a film within a certain amount of time. Kind of went back to Marvel. Marvel then decided to do their own standalone movie studio called Marvel Studios, as we know it now, led by Kevin Feige, who previously was a producer on loads of different Marvel films. His kind of line goes all the way back to the first X-Men. So he's been involved with Marvel films more or less from the beginning. He has a very long history. They then entrust him to kind of lead this new direction for the MCU, what would be called the MCU. But that all started off with the original Iron Man. Casting Robert Downey Jr. at the time, an actor that had been through a lot of legal problems. He'd spent time in jail. Obviously, had all the history with his drug problems and alcohol problems. An actor, people like to over-exaggerate this when they say no one wanted to touch Robert Downey Jr. His career was dead. No one wanted to work with him. That's not factually true. That's just not factually true at all. He'd performed well in films like Zodiac and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang before he got the role of Tony Stark, so he'd already started to rebuild his career before Iron Man. But this was the film that shot him off into the stratosphere and becoming one of the biggest stars of all time, as far as Hollywood goes anyway, being one of the biggest actors in the world. So yeah, the film stars Robert Downey Jr., Terrence Howard, Gwyneth Paltrow, directed by Jon Favreau, who previously was mostly known for films like Swingers, Elf, which was one of the most, even now people love Elf. It's one of my personal favourite Christmas films. So at the time, people was thinking the director of Elf's going to be doing Iron Man. Weird choice, but okay. Obviously, it paid off. Jon Favreau created a fantastic film, brought a very unique sense of humour and levity in the tone of the film. And that's one of the strongest points of Iron Man for me, is the tone, the story, how the story's presented, this story of Tony Stark, this cocky, pompous billionaire who, has this weapons company. He's in charge of this weapons company that was made by his dad. And then obviously his dad, died. I don't want to spoil until I get to where I want to, but something happened with his parents. He then became the head of Stark Industries, helped run by Obadiah Stane, played by Jeff Bridges, and they make Stark Industries into this big, massive company who Tony is the head of. Now, the underhanded thing is that Obadiah, obviously, as we learn in the film, is working with this terrorist organisation called the Ten Rings to sell them weapons underhandedly. for more money, for profit, basically. Tony doesn't know this. Tony has no idea what's going on. He then gets captured by this very same terrorist company, this terrorist organisation. They capture Tony Stark and attempt to get him to make this weapon called the Jericho missile. This kind of ultra weapon that can wipe out like a small army base, and this devastating weapon that they want to use to kind of target mainly US based army sources. Tony gets captured by them. He has these fatal wounds. He's kept alive by a scientist who's also captured with him called Bo Yinsen, who creates a machine, like a magnet attached to a car battery to keep the shrapnel from entering Tony's heart. The shrapnel from the missile. It stopped it going into his heart. Kept him alive so that they could try and create the Jericho missile. During this, Tony creates his own weapon to escape captivity. He creates this prototype, the prototype Iron Man suit. Creates a miniaturized version of an arc reactor, which is used to power the factory that he works in. He's using that for that. So, long story short, he escapes captivity. He comes back to the US and tries to refine his design, refine his technology, all at the same time. The terrorist organisation, the Ten Rings, find the original prototype Iron Man suit and work with Obadiah Stane behind Tony Stark's back to create their own version of this suit, this armour. Obadiah Stane basically steals the prototype suit, adds a few little adjustments to it. Him and Tony fight for control of the company at the end, and fight for Tony's name in a way. The film is brilliant for me. A lot of people still consider it one of the best MCU films. For me, it is still up there. I wouldn't put it near the top, but if you was going to say top 10, I'd definitely have it in my top 10. Even though I do think future films did exceed it, I think from start to finish, it's one of the best films that the MCU have done. Especially like top 10, I'd definitely say that. Specific wise, I don't know if I'd have it like, I don't know, probably about 8th or 7th best MCU film. It's got a great sense of humour. I love the way Jon Favreau approached this material. He added so much comedy and also so much drama and tension into the film. It's very odd in a way because you are on edge, especially during that cave scene where Tony's been captured and he's making his prototype Iron Man suit. You do feel a lot for this character. You are on edge. For most of the film, you really are kind of nervous to see if Tony can escape, what condition he's going to be in, and even now, even though I know the story, you know where he goes, you still feel that, and that comes through from Jon Favreau's direction. Really well edited. The first 2 acts are edited really sharply. The film moves along at a really good pace. Never feels like it's dragging. Never feels like any scene is just there for time padding. Every scene is important and leads to the other. It's a very structured film. Robert Downey Jr., like I said, he's born to play this role. He adds this kind of charm and charisma, but also a sense of darkness and almost like a sense of awkwardness to the role of Tony Stark as well, which makes him a very interesting character, which is why he's probably so liked in a way. You can see this character is kind of like a nerd, but he's like very bright. You see his bravery, you see his confidence, his ability to like permeate energy through a room is unbelievable. And every time he's on screen, which is through most of the film, those are the best scenes in the film. He's amazing in it. And he definitely, even though later films obviously reprised his role, I think this is probably one of the best performances he's given as Tony Stark. Maybe Endgame, I don't know, but this is definitely one of the best performances he gave as the character. It's a really good performance from start to finish, and he was really good in the role, 100%. Gwyneth Paltrow's good as well. It's kind of like an old joke in comic book films that the relationships are always the worst parts. The love, kind of the love story in comic book films are always kind of the worst parts of the film. This is the one kind of exception. Like, this works. Tony Pepper, that relationship works really well. It's believable. They have good chemistry with each other. They have good banter with each other. The scenes really help to build their relationship and build this growing tension between the two, and it really works and helps sell this world. Because you feel for the characters. If you don't feel for the characters, there's not a sequel. Like, it's just, that's the way it is. You have to feel for these characters, and definitely the way Gwyneth Paltrow and Robert Downey Jr. play these roles, it worked really well throughout the entire film. Jeff Bridges is a fantastic villain. It's a shame he never came back, in a way. I know, obviously, this is all going to be filled with spoilers. So if you don't like spoilers, don't come anywhere near this. Leave now, because it's going to be full with all these reviews are going to be filled with spoilers. So he's very good in this film. Jeff Bridges is always a joy to watch. So entertaining. He's also very menacing as well. Like, some scenes, that scene where he takes the arc reactor out of Tony's chest is a very tense scene. And he does play evil very well, I have to say. For someone who's so likeable in something like The Big Lebowski, he's so believable as a villain. He did really good in this film, Jeff Bridges. Very underrated performance from him. Terrence Howard was good as well. Obviously, later got replaced by Don Cheadle as the role of War Machine. But in this, he's good in the role. It's weird looking back and seeing him in this role, because Don Cheadle has played this role so much to this point. It's weird to see Terrence Howard in this role, but he's good in it. Like, I'm not going to say he's not good in the role. He is good in the role. But it's just weird going back. It's a weird thing to get used to. Sorry. I really need a drink. Your throat gets really dry, guys. Sure, sucked in a bit of water then. Okay. Now, even though I have a lot of good things to say about this film, the visual effects are really good, the music's incredible, the direction's really good, the tone's really good. The film isn't without problems. Mainly when we get into the third act. When we get into the third act, that's when this film starts to kind of go off kilter a little bit. And what I mean by that is the film is set up, has been building up so well. Every scene's been leading well into each other. I don't think this film needed to end with two robots fighting each other. Like, I don't think this film needed an ending like that. I think an ending that would have been more kind of personal with each other, because of the relationship between Obadiah Stane and Tony Stark. More of a kind of personable relationship kind of ending between the two would have worked, I think. I think that would have worked better than the two big dumb robots fighting each other. It didn't work for me, and the film became a little bit cheesy. It kind of went a few years back in a way and turned into like a kind of a dumb mid-2000s superhero film. It didn't really fit the tone of what the film was already building up for, if that makes any sense. I just think this film could have ended a little bit better. I think if they went for more of, say, like a thriller kind of ending, more of like a conspiracy, political thriller type of ending, it could have been a bit more interesting. Say, for example, Tony has to kind of, Obadiah goes to hide out with the 10 rings, and he has to kind of go past them all and beat them. I don't know, something like that. Maybe have the tension there being the Jericho missile, and Obadiah going to use the Jericho missile to blow up Stark, to blow up like a city or so, something like that. Something like that. A bit more personal, a bit more tense, a little bit more dramatic, rather than just having two big CGI robots fighting each other. And I have to say, this has been a problem. This is a problem that continues in the early days of the MCU. So if you don't like the ending of Iron Man, get used to it. Get used to it, because it doesn't stop. It definitely is a problem that continues throughout these films. And Iron Man, it's just a shame, because the film could have been even better than it was if we didn't get the dumb ending and the kind of dumb climax, like Pepper outrunning Obadiah when she's wearing like high heels. If you remember that ending bit of Jurassic World where Bryce Dallas Howard's character's running away from the T-Rex in high heels, it's basically that, but years earlier with Gwyneth Paltrow instead. It's very, like, you're watching it and you're like, come on, man, like, are you being serious? Okay, it was dumb. But the film it doesn't ruin the film at all. It doesn't ruin the film. I just feel like the ending could have been better to more fit the film that we got in the previous two acts. But like I said, didn't ruin the film. The film's still really good. One of the best films in the MCU. Still, like I said, probably in the top 10. All the performances are good. The visual effects still hold up really well today. The music's great. The editing's fantastic. Direction, brilliant. There's not really much more I can say about this film. It was the major positive I can give for this film is that it set the tone. It set the tone for everything we got after. Like, without the tone set up in Iron Man, without the tone that we got, I don't think the MCU would have been as successful. I don't think it would have been. I think the tone they set up was so perfect for what the audience was looking for. Because at the time, don't forget, at the time, this era, it's almost like there was like superhero films trying to be dark, trying to be like edgy and this like moody, grungy type of feel, right? We had like the X-Men in the early 2000s, which never really embraced the comic book aspect of the characters, never embraced the fun side. Films like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films was very serious, almost like dramas in a way. The Nolan Batman films was very dark and broody, and Iron Man went the other way and went in a more light-hearted, family-friendly kind of route in the tone, more comedic, more light-hearted, with still having those moments of drama and having those moments of tension as well. So it wasn't without tension, it wasn't without the drama. It was there, but it was slowly permeating through, if that makes sense. It wasn't this kind of thing where you just get beat over the head with it, right? It's not like a campy film, and it rides that line really well, and that's the tone that goes through the entire MCU, through the entire series. Even now, it goes through the entire series, and it all started with what Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. and everyone that worked on this film. That was started with Iron Man. So I think its legacy goes far beyond just being a good film. You know, its legacy is definitely cemented for what it was able to do for the MCU and what it was able to do for the future of the franchise, really, and for the series. It's and for the genre as well, in a way. Like it showed. It's a very important film, I think, for that reason more than anything else. Right, with that out the way, with Iron Man out the way, let's get on to the second film of the MCU, the film that everyone skips. It has to be said, right? This is the film that everybody skips. And look, I've been guilty of it myself. I've been guilty of skipping this film too. And that film is The Incredible Hulk. Like I said, I've already kind of talked about this film a little bit in a previous episode, but that episode was like 2 years ago. So I want to do kind of like an updated opinion on this film. For me, The Incredible Hulk is a very odd film because this is a film that has so much going for it. Like, honestly, there is such a good film in there. And what we get is this very... It's so out of place from everything else. And my phone just... I swear, this is becoming like a thing, right? In every single podcast, Every single podcast, my phone, which I'm using as a light, by the way, because if you look, the lighting's crap. Have that there, you can see me, right? It's becoming a joke now because my phone will like go off, like I'll have notifications. I guess I could just put it in airplane mode, but it keeps going off every single time I do a podcast, every single time, and it's just so frustrating. Right, next podcast, I'm putting it in airplane mode. I'm definitely doing that. But okay, let's get back onto the Incredible Hulk. This film was directed by Louis Leterrier, a director mainly known for doing action films. So you can kind of see what we're going to be getting with The Incredible Hulk. This is a full-blown action film. Like, that's what it is. It is a action film with... this film, I don't think, fit the director. And this is where the Edward Norton thing comes in, right? Because... very famously, when Edward Norton was brought on to play the role of Bruce Banner, he wanted to do rewrites, where he did rewrites on Zach Penn's original script, which focused more on Bruce's kind of the struggle, the more human side of the Hulk and Bruce, and that kind of self-reflective storytelling, if that makes any sense. So kind of more of a human story than an action story, right? That's what he wanted to do. That was the original vision of what Edward Norton wanted to do with the character of the Hulk. Louis Leterrier is an action director. So you get this kind of conflict. You get this conflict of... there is a dramatic human story within a dumb, overblown CGI monster movie. And the two don't work. The best scenes in this film genuinely are the scenes with just Bruce Banner. The best things in this film is the Bruce Banner in Brazil scenes, when he's trying to hide and control his anger and fit in at work and being paranoid about his blood in that factory and trying to find a cure. Those are the best parts of the film. For the first, I'd say the first like hour of this film is really good. Like the first half an hour to an hour is really good. It's a really good film. Like the opening credits are really good. It tells the Hulk's origin story without going over everything and plodding the film out. You know exactly the backstory without going into too much detail. You already know what the film is setting up. You know how Bruce became the Hulk in a way. So you don't have to get bogged down with the origin story, which is in the credits in a really well edited way, and the music's really good. And I'll get onto the music after as well. But there is this two conflicting tones in this film, and it makes the film feel like a jumbled jigsaw. Similar to something, say, like a Suicide Squad, right? There is this really dramatic, intense film stuck within a film edited to be a comedy. This is a very dramatic human story edited into a film that's trying to be a big, entertaining, crowd-pleasing action monster movie. That's what... And the two don't work, right? And like I said, the best scenes in the film are the ones set in Brazil near the start of the film with Bruce. I think that the scenes are really well edited. The story goes along at a very good pace. You start to feel for the character. It builds up sympathy for Bruce really well. And that comes through a lot through Norton's performance as well. Edward Norton's, I think, is really good in this film. Everyone bigs up on Mark Ruffalo. For me, I don't think he suits what my idea of the Hulk is. He did originally, but I think as the character's progressed, he's turned into a joke in a way. They've kind of made the Hulk a joke. This is the Hulk I like. It's very reminiscent of the 70s TV series. Or was it the 80s? 70s or 80s, it was very reminiscent of that Bill Bixby Hulk TV series, of this the lonely man, right? That's the story of the Incredible Hulk. a man who can't fit in anywhere, who's on the edge constantly, desperate to cure himself, just wants to be a normal guy, but he's burdened by this curse, right? And you see the inspiration for that not only in the opening credits, but there's musical callbacks as well to the original music from that TV series. And the film is really good at that. Like, the film is good at building emotion and building sympathy for the characters. It makes you feel sympathy for Bruce Banner, and that's one of the best parts of the film. Now, I guess one other positive thing I have to say is I have to talk about the music. This music, the score is incredible. The score is the best thing about this film. Craig Armstrong's score is... I'm going to say it's the best score in the MCU outside of Endgame. And even maybe top Endgame, I don't know. Maybe it tops Endgame. I'm not sure. But it's definitely one of the best scores in the MCU. I think throughout the entire film, it's such a unique kind of use of percussion and, like, quick beats. It's a very great. Honestly, it's a fantastic score. It's if you've not heard the score for the Incredible Hulk, just go back and listen to it. It has hints of, like, horror in there. It has hints of, like, drama and thriller kind of tension there. And also, it's just so... It's great to listen to. Some of the tracks can be so emotional to hear, and then other tracks are so quick and really, like, when it's in the film as well, it really helps add to the tension and add to the excitement and the frantic nature of what's going on in the scenes. It's fantastic. Like, I every few months will listen to that soundtrack. I'm a bit of a soundtrack guy with films anyway, so when I listen to a good soundtrack, it sticks out for me, and this is one of those soundtracks. The soundtrack for The Incredible Hulk, I still say, is one of the best and most underrated film scores ever. Like, it's weird in a way because it doesn't fit the film it's in. The film isn't good enough to have a score like this, but the score in itself makes scenes better than they would be. Let's just say that. If it wasn't for the score, a lot of the scenes in this film I don't think would be as good as they are. But because of the score, they do work. And Craig Armstrong, I think, really deserves a lot of praise and credit for that. He really helped make this film more than it is. Now, away from the positives, this film has a lot going for it, like negative things in it, right? It hasn't aged well. For one, the design of the Hulk and the animation, the visual effects aren't great. They're really not great, especially, like, the first scene where you see the Hulk, it kind of works. He's in the shadows. They're kind of keeping him away so you can't see him. That works. It works then because he's in the shadows. He's kind of blurred out. It works then. When he's in broad daylight, it's so bad. Like, it's so bad. And this obviously came out the same year as Iron Man. It came out a few months after Iron Man. And the visual effects in Iron Man still hold up now. And my light has gone again. Oh my God. This is awful, guys. Like I said, if you watch my podcast from the other day, you'll know I'm still in the process of moving. Right, I'm putting this on airplane mode. I'm still in the process of moving. So I can't get my actual lights out. I've got proper, like, studio lighting, but I can't get it out yet because I'm still in the process of moving. If you're listening to this on audio, it's going to be very weird because you're going to be like, what's he on about? But trust me, if you're watching this on video, then you'll know it's happened twice already, and it happens in every single one I do. It's a nightmare, right? Okay, that's up there. That's not moving now. I'll put it on airplane mode. That's not going anywhere. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Anyway, going back to the Hulk, the visual effects just do not work for me. They don't. When it's a scene in broad daylight and the Hulk he has to kind of blend into the environment is in. The animators have got to kind of blend CGI with real footage. That's when it's at its worst because it looks terrible. Like you can tell it's CGI. You can tell it almost looks like a video game. Like it looks like a video game. Like if you know that Incredible Hulk video game, genuinely, and I mean this, I'm not saying this for a laugh. The animation in the game really isn't that far behind the animation for the Hulk in the film. Like there's really not that much difference, which is weird, right? And that game's terrible as well. But going away from the game, that's a story for another day. Going away from the game, just focusing on the film, the animation is really bad. And this is for a lot of the things in the film as well. That scene where he's transforming into the Hulk, it's very weird to watch. It's uncomfortable to watch. It's very... The sound mixing really makes that scene. You can hear... It almost sounds like bones cracking and like... It's a very well sounded like scene. That scene is very good. It works with the sound. The sound makes it better. But the actual visual effects are awful. They're really bad. And that's throughout the film. And it gets worse when we get the Abomination. Now, onto the Abomination. Tim Roth is fantastic in this film. Really good. And I'm glad he's coming back. We get to see him in She-Hulk, I think, when the She-Hulk series comes out. Sorry, sitting on this mattress kills my back, man. Oh, God. Hey. Right, okay. So, yeah, we get to see him back in She-Hulk in a few years, which is going to be great because I love Tim Roth in this role. And he's always been one of my favourite MCU villains when he's just Emil Blonsky, right? But when it comes into the Abomination, it's just awful. It's just... You've got the big CGI Hulk facing... You've got the big CGI green Hulk facing the big CGI orange Hulk. And honestly, it's awful, guys. It's so bad. Like... It's awful. The animation, the visual effects are so bad for this scene. Every time I watch it, it gets worse. Like, it hasn't aged well. And people will say it's from 2008. And there was good effects in 2008, guys. It's not that far back. I can excuse a film like X-Men or something like that, but this film isn't that far back. And the effects are not blended well into their real environments, and it stands out so badly. It just does. And again, this film is a film that didn't need to end the way it did. It's one of those films, again, it's similar to Iron Man in that sense, that this film didn't need to end with the big CGI Hulk facing the big CGI Hulk, just like Iron Man didn't need to end with the big CGI robot fighting the big CGI robot. It's the same thing over and over again. And this film really, really sticks out for it because it hasn't got the solid two first acts to kind of back it up. In a way, it's reliant on a third act to save it, and it doesn't happen. Like, it just doesn't happen. And it's a shame. Like, it's a real shame because there is, like I said, guys, there's a good film in this. There's a really good film in here, and it's kind of hid away under this mess of overblown CGI action mess. And it doesn't work. Like, I'm not opposed to good CGI action films. Like, no matter what I say about the Transformers films, the CGI in those films are fantastic. And Transformers came out a year before Incredible Hulk. And sorry, I just burped. Jesus Christ. I'm disgraceful. So yeah, that came out like a year before, man. And it was just awful. Like, comparing it to Transformers is like comparing, like, I don't know. I'm trying to use a good analogy. Okay, it's like comparing like a brand new pair of shoes to that one reliable pair of shoes that you've had for so long, but they stink and they've got holes in. That's going to be my analogy for today. That's such a bad analogy. But you kind of get the point that I'm saying, right? You've got this kind of new, this fresher look, and then you've got this kind of old, dated, needs to be thrown in the bin, quite frankly, kind of visual effects. And it really brings the film down. But it's a weird one, though, because I still like it. No matter all that I've said about The Incredible Hulk so far, I still like this film in a way. despite its flaws. And a lot of it does come from the music. A lot of it does come through from the performances, except from Liv Tyler, who is, like... You hear me rant about Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. Don't get me started on Liv Tyler in Incredible Hulk. Oh, God, she's so bad in this film. Half the lines, she's kind of like whispering her lines. And she's trying to be like... It's almost like she's trying to be a model. Like, she's too busy trying to think about, like, do I look good in this scene rather than am I conveying these true emotions? Like, half of the lines, she's just whispering... Even in really intense scenes, like scenes that require a lot of emotion, she's so quiet and whispery and breathy, and it doesn't work, guys. And I mean, I've not really seen Liv Tyler in much. She was in The Lord of the Rings. She had a very small role in that, and she was passable. And like anything else I've seen her in, I don't know. But this film really doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So she isn't very good, but the rest of the performances are really good. William Hurt's really good as General Ross. Edward Norton is fantastic as Bruce Banner. Like I said, Tim Roth is really good as Emil Blonsky. So the film's got good performances in there. The performances aren't the problem. For me, the biggest problem with Hulk is the contrast in different ways of trying to tell a story, different kind of clashes in the tone. Because in some points of the film, it can get really tense and scary, almost. And then other times, it's kind of trying to be this really deep, thoughtful drama, and the two tones don't clash. So I think that's one of the biggest points that I'll say about The Hulk, is that it's a very tonally inconsistent film. The visual effects are really outdated. Even back then, like they're not good, guys. They're really bad. If you've never watched The Hulk, you know, and I think also the one thing that doesn't go really for the Hulk is that there's not really a lot of connective tissue leading to other films, right? Like there's the character of General Ross, but he's almost like a completely different character when he shows up again in Civil War. Like it's almost like a completely different version of that character. It's not the same character. Like, yeah, it's the same actor and it's the same character technically, but they're played so differently. There's different approach when compared to you know, the two versions of the characters. They're two different versions, really, of that character. So that's one of the things that I'll say. The performances are really good. Music's fantastic. The dramatic scenes in the film are good, but it's the two conflicting tones, the really kind of suspect ending, the dodgy visual effects. There's a lot of things like that in this film that really hold it back, and it is the worst film in the series. Like, I'll stand by that. For me, it's so unimportant to watch this, especially because we got Ruffalo as well, and he plays the character so differently. It is the film you can skip. Like, you really don't need to watch this film. It's got no that's the one thing that really goes against it, I think, is because it doesn't matter how bad other films are in the series, the films connect to each other, so you almost feel like you have to watch them. With this film, it doesn't have that, so it's a shame in a way, but you know, it is what it is. I do think though this film could have been better than it was, and I still contend that there is a good film in here somewhere. It's just unfortunate that we never got to see it, and it's just unfortunate that we never got Edward Norton back as Bruce Banner, because I really think that could have been very interesting to see where he could have took that character. It's one of those things, you know, what could have been, like, what if, right? I would have been interesting to see, but unfortunately we're never going to get that. But kind of going away from Hulk, now going on to the next film in the MCU, and that is talking about Iron Man 2. Another film that a lot of people don't like, a film that a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about, and for most of the points I understand, but then a lot of the time, this is going to one of the things I'm going to say in this review is going to be very, very controversial, and I know people are going to listen to this and going to think I'm crazy, right? And I'll get onto that in a bit. But just talking about the overall film, this film, coming off the back of Iron Man, very highly anticipated. Very, very highly anticipated. A lot of people looking forward to this film, looking to see how this character continues. Jon Favreau's back as director as well, so it's almost like a given, that this film's going to be good. And despite me saying I don't think it's as bad as people say it is, like, people say this film's a bad film. It's not a bad film. It's not a bad film. I don't know, actually. No, I'm not going to say that Iron Man's a bad film. I don't think it's a bad film. I just think it's an unfocused film. I think that's the best way to explain how I look at Iron Man 2. The film feels very unfocused, and it's mainly down to how the tone was so consistent in the first one. I think this one goes a bit up and down a little bit. The focus isn't there from that first film. The focus from the tone isn't there. Like, the Iron Man 2 goes from being this really kind of serious story about Tony Stark trying to find a way to survive, and then it goes to goofy Sam Rockwell. So the two tones are a little bit off. It still kind of blends in together and it works, but that's one of the things that I will say stand out as a negative for me. Positives wise, Robert Downey Jr. is incredible. Again, like, it's worth watching the film just for him. Like, he's still really good in this role. Gwyneth Paltrow, again, is really good in this role. We get more of Jon Favreau as an actor and his role as Happy. We get more of him, which is great. I think he's really good in the role as well. We get Sam Jackson, who appeared at the end of Iron Man in the end credits. We get more of him in this film as Nick Fury, and he's very good in the film. Scarlett Johansson is introduced as Natasha Romanoff for the first time. And even though I think her character didn't really get the treatment it deserved until Endgame, quite frankly, I'd say Endgame was really when her character got the treatment it deserved. She's decent, like, her performance is really good. I just don't think the character's written very well. But apart from that, she's okay in the film, right? Mickey Rourke is shocking in this film. He's so bad, and I think he could have been cut out of this film. This is one of the things I'll say about Iron Man 2, where I feel like it's very unfocused, because they have two main villains in this film. They have Mickey Rourke, who plays a version of Whiplash. He's not called Whiplash, but he's basically Whiplash. Ivan Vanko, right? And then we get Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer. We get the two villains. I don't think this story itself needed two villains, because there's already a lot of story threads going on in this film anyway. We get so much going on in this film. It's too much. It's too jumbled. It's not focused, and it kind of goes all over the place. So as far as the story things that are kind of going all over the place go, there's the story about Tony trying to find a replacement for the Palladium core, which is killing him in his arc reactor. So that's one of the story threads we have. We have the storyline of Pepper taking over Stark Industries, and kind of her role in being in charge of Stark Industries. We have that storyline. Then on top of that, we have the introduction of Black Widow, and we have Nick Fury's role expanded, trying to set up the Avengers and trying to kind of plant the seed for that in the future. Then we have the story of Ivan Vanko and his kind of revenge storyline against the Starks. And then we have the story of Justin Hammer, and there's just so much going on in this film, and it just feels like this film either needed to be edited down or a lot of it needed to just be cut. I think the storyline of Ivan Vanko didn't need to be there. There was enough motivation there between him and Justin Hammer. Right, this is Tony. The story between him and Justin Hammer is interesting because it's the parallel, right? This is Tony Stark. If Tony Stark didn't have Pepper, to keep him down to earth. This is Tony Stark. If Tony Stark prioritised money over, tried to help people and being unselfish, that kind of mirror image of each other is interesting. That's a good story thread. That's an interesting story thread, but it gets interfered and ruined by the introduction of Ivan Vanko. Mickey Rourke, his performance itself is poor. I think it's poor in the sense that he kind of just looks like he's going through the motions a little bit, and a lot has been said about Mickey Rourke. A lot of the things that he did was cut from the film, and it would have been interesting to see what could have been with that character. I just don't think it needed to be there. I just don't think it needed to be in the film. And it ruins the other storylines around it. I think that's the main thing. It brings down the storyline with him and Justin Hammer. It takes the focus away from his relationship with Pepper and that kind of storyline. And it takes away from that. And I think if you cut that storyline out, I think if you don't pay as much attention to the whole Avengers setup and just have the main threads of this story be his relationship with Justin Hammer and him trying to find a replacement for the arc reactor, I think if you focused on those two storylines as your main story threads, this film could have been a lot better. So I think the main negative from this film is the overblown story, the too much going on, an unfocused narrative. Those are the main points of negativity from this film, in my opinion. Now, I love the character of Justin Hammer. A lot of people hate it, and for me, I think it's incredible. Even the small details in Sam Rockwell's performance, even those small details, like, a lot of people don't notice this, but like even the things with him, like always having fake tan on his hands, and like he's trying to dress like Tony Stark, and then when he comes out on the Stark Expo, he tries to act like Tony Stark. Like his insecurities and his kind of failure and in his ambition to be what he's trying to overcome is very interesting. And I think it's a shame he never came back. I really do. I think it's such a shame that he never come back in anything, because I think that character is a really good character. I think there's a lot there that they could have done, and obviously the whole Tony Stark storyline's kind of done now, but I would have liked to have seen him in Iron Man 3 as the main, like if they wanted to do that main villain thing. I think it's a shame he never came back. He's almost set up to come back at the end, where he's saying, like, when he's having that little argument with Pepper after he gets arrested, it almost kind of sets up that he will come back, but it never happened. I think it's due to most people not liking the character, and maybe I'm in the minority with this. But I do think there is a very good character there, but it just kind of gets it gets drawn down and shown up because of the interfering storyline with the Mickey Rourke character, and I think that's one of the main things. But like I said, away from Mickey Rourke, I think the performance is really good. The visual effects are still fantastic. They still hold up really well. Don Cheadle's role, Don Cheadle takes over the role of Rhodey from Terrence Howard, and he's really good in the film. The role gets expanded. We see him more as this kind of very militant, strict, but also this kind of warm nature to him as well. So it's a very interesting take on the character, and I think it works well with Tony. I think it works well with Tony Stark. Those two characters work well together. Again, the ending of the film with it ends in a very similar way to the first one, with him fighting the big Iron Man robot again, and even though it kind of works because you get, I'll say it works, but in a way it doesn't work, because I don't like the setup for what we got with that. I don't like the setup. So even though the ending was somewhat entertaining and it was shot well and it was edited well together and the effects was good, I didn't really care for the character of Ivan Vanko enough to care about the conclusion of the story. And that's a big problem. So even though I don't think this film is as bad as everyone seems to say it is, I do think it does have problems. And if this film was cut to, not include certain characters and certain storylines, this film I do think could have been a lot better. I really do think that, and it's just a shame that that we never kind of. It's a shame. I mean, maybe if like the character of Ivan Vanko came back in if he would have came back in a sequel and his character would have got expanded, maybe we would have got more there. I don't know, but for what we got in Iron Man 2, it's a very unfocused film. But there is still a good film in there, and it's still fun to watch. Like, it's still very funny. Even though it can be a bit overblown sometimes, it's still very funny and it's still very entertaining, and it leads into the Avengers quite well in a way. Not too heavy, but it still leads into the Avengers quite well. Now, after Iron Man 2, the film that came after Iron Man 2, the next film we will be reviewing today is the first Thor film with Chris Hemsworth, and the first time in playing this character. This is a film that... Right, this is going to be tough. It's going to be tough to talk about Thor because... I don't even know how to approach talking about Thor in a way. Because every problem I have with the Thor film comes from the way it looks. And that's going to sound weird. Right, that's going to sound strange, except from one story thing that bugs me a lot, but I'll get onto that in a bit. But my main thing with this film is it's so hard to watch, and it's because of the fucking Dutch angles. I don't know what Kenneth Branagh was thinking. Kenneth Branagh, I love Kenneth Branagh. Come on, he's Gilderoy Lockhart in Harry Potter. Of course I'm going to love Kenneth Branagh, right? But I don't know what he was thinking in this film. I think he was a good choice as far as a director. If you're talking about directing actors and getting performances out of actors and really taking care with the story, he was a really good choice for that. I just don't know what he was thinking with those Dutch angles. The film is flooded with Dutch angles. Almost every single shot that and it doesn't need it. It feels like I'm watching fucking Battlefield Earth in space, like in golden space, or on crappy little Earth. Like, it's awful. Like, the film it looks so amateur. And it's so hard to get through. I'm sorry, it just really bugs me. And it bugs me because I just can't stand Dutch angles. Dutch angles, for me, are such a pet peeve of mine. And they can make a good film bad. And I don't think it does that with Thor, because there is still a lot to like in it. But if this film didn't have Dutch angles, it would be such a better film. Like, I really think this film, if it had a better love story between Thor and Jane and didn't have the Dutch angles, this film would have been brilliant. But those two things are there, so I can't ignore it. I can't say it's not there, right? It just looks awful. Like, it looks so bad with those Dutch angles. And a lot of the time when I'm watching it, it takes me out the film. It takes me out the film. When I'm watching it, I'm just thinking, oh God, these Dutch angles, I wish they would just go away. And they don't. They're throughout the entire film. Throughout the entire film, we just get Dutch angle. Two people having a talk, having a conversation, Dutch angle. Two people fighting, Dutch angle. People just driving around in a car, Dutch angle. There's just Dutch angles everywhere. And honestly, there's only so much I can take of watching Dutch angles 24/7. I can't deal with it. And it ruins the good points, a lot of the good points in the film, because it takes it out of it. The action's choreographed well. The animation, the visual effects is good in these scenes. But because they've got Dutch angles, it's so hard to watch them and enjoy them, because it just takes me out of the film. Like, you might not be bothered by that. Like, you might not be bothered by Dutch angles, but for me, it's hard, man. It's hard to get through this film and not be bothered by the Dutch angles. It's not like, say, like Justice League, right, with the aspect ratio, and you kind of get used to it over time, and it's not like that with the Dutch angles, because it doesn't stay consistent with it, right? There's a lot of moments where it kind of flips back and forth between Dutch angle and then traditional, a traditionally framed shot, and then we go back to Dutch angle again, and it's just if people don't know what a Dutch angle is, I haven't really explained what a Dutch angle is, right? If people don't know what a Dutch angle is, it's where the camera... So, for example, right, I'm going to do this with my laptop. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see. So, this is how it's normally shot, right? That's how it's normally shot. Dutch angle is this. So, I'm having a conversation, that's a Dutch angle. And that happens throughout the entire film, and it's a constant thing, and it's very annoying and unnecessary. Now, away from that, I don't really have much negatives on this film, except from the love story between Thor and Jane. I think it's awful. They're written really poorly. They have no chemistry together. It's based solely on appearance. I don't believe that these characters like each other's personalities or like each other. It's not like their personalities are so engaging or they have a really great kind of banter with each other and that kind of builds up their relationship. It's literally just two attractive people who want to fuck. Basically, that's literally I know it sounds a bit crude. That is the basis of their relationship in this film. It's just two people who want to make whoopee with each other. That's all this film. That's the whole basis of their story. And I guess they kind of have the thing with Jane being an astrophysicist, and she's going to be interested in Thor because of the more scientific aspects. They kind of explain that around that the campfire scene. That's the only scene where they have a little bit of a moment there. There's a little thing there, right? Except from that scene, everything else is terrible in the love story, right? Everything's terrible. So that's a pet peeve of mine with this film, is that the love story is terrible. Another thing is Kat Dennings. And I know this has been talked about 1,000 times, and I didn't mind her in WandaVision. I didn't love her in WandaVision, but I didn't mind her in WandaVision. It was nice to see her back. It's a good throwback and everything. But she is annoying in this film. Like, she's supposed to be the comic relief. But this film didn't need a comic relief. Like, the film is funny. Like, I'll say that about Thor. There's a lot of funny scenes in this film. There's a lot of funny scenes, especially, and Chris Hemsworth is funny. So I don't think you need a typical comic relief character. I don't think she's the Jar Jar Binks of this film, right? I mean, that's going to trigger some Star Wars fans, but oh well, sorry. But she's the Jar Jar Binks of this film. She's the annoying sidekick who won't shut up and just keeps moaning and complaining and then saying stupid things that don't need to be said and trying to push the plot along, and it's really obvious what they're trying to do, and it's really bad. And Kat Dennings' performance isn't great. She's really annoying in this film. And I like her in a lot of films. I think she's a decent actress. She's got a certain thing that works, and it doesn't work in this particular film. But so my main issues with Thor are Dutch angles. Dutch angles. Yeah, definitely Dutch angles. The poor love story and Kat Dennings. Those are the main issues. Away from that, the film is good. There's a lot to like in this film. I like the character of Thor. I like the fish out of water storyline. I don't think Thor is as good as he is in Infinity War or Ragnarok, or it's not that Thor. Like, it's a very different character. This Thor is less kind of self-aware. He's more serious in that sense, and it works in the film, even though it's a very different version of Thor. It works for the fish out of water kind of story, because it turns scenes that wouldn't be funny into funny scenes, because he is the fish out of water, and that kind of brings comedic moments, right? Another with the smashing the glass, and because he's not used to kind of Earth etiquette, I guess. So it is a funny film, and there's a lot of humour in this. Chris Hemsworth is good in this film. He's good as Thor. He's Thor, right? That's when we think of Thor, we think of Chris Hemsworth. And in this film alone, if you take his performance in a vacuum, he's still really good in this film. And he brings that character to life. And he is funny, and he's charming, and he's got this kind of this authoritative way about him, but he's also, you can see the childish nature there, right? Which Taika Waititi would play on with Ragnarok, right? And really embrace that part of Hemsworth's performance. But in this film, it's not as strong, but it is there, and he's good in this film. Natalie Portman's performance is good, but like I said, she's just written terribly. Like her performance, the actual performance isn't the problem. It's more the way she's been written and the material she's been given, right? But her actual performance isn't that bad. What's his name? I'm trying to think of the actor's name who played Eric Selvig. Is it Stellan Skarsgård? I think it's Stellan Skarsgård. I could be butchering that, but I think that's him. He's good in the film. He's very good. He's kind of the he's the one who does a lot of the exposition. He's the one who does a lot of the science. We need a character to kind of make the audience believe what we're saying is true, so we'll use Eric Selvig, right? That's what the character's there for. And he works well in the film, even though he's a bit of an exposition machine. He works well in the film. And I think he performs well. He has good chemistry with the other actors. Anthony Hopkins is really good as Odin as well, which is weird because he's so creepy, like in Silence of the Lambs as Hannibal Lecter, but then he can be so kind of warm and inviting as Odin, and like regal, and so it's so good, and that shows how good of an actor he is, that he can completely disguise and embrace that different type of character. Like, he's very good in the film. Tom Hiddleston, I don't know. He isn't the Avengers Loki. Let's just say that about Tom Hiddleston in this film. He's not bad in the film. Again, this is more down to the writing, really. The performance isn't bad. It's just the character is more of a whiny... He's like a whiny child, and I don't think he makes a very good villain. I don't think he works as a villain in this film. He does in the Avengers. Like, he's fantastic in the Avengers. Oh, God, I've got wires everywhere. He works well in the Avengers, but in this film he doesn't really work, and it's mainly due to this kind of whiny, like moany thing that he does consistently throughout the film, and it's really distracting in it. And it doesn't help with the Dutch angles either, because they're kind of trying to make him seem more menacing than he is, and he's really not. Like, Loki's not menacing. He's not a menacing character, right? That's not what Loki is. I don't look at Tom Hiddleston's Loki and think he's menacing. I think he's more mischievous and more playful and sneaky. I don't think he's menacing, and there's a lot of scenes in this film where they try to make him menacing and it just comes off as cheesy. So his performance, it can go a little bit, yeah. And I think the way he's written doesn't help as well. So, you know, that's one of the things. The music's really good. I think, who did the music for this? Was it Brian? No, it wasn't. I think it was Henry Jackman, wasn't it? Was it Henry Jackman who did the score for Thor? I can't remember. But I like the music in the film. The music's really good. I like that main Thor theme. That kind of... They carried that theme into the next film as well. And that kind of was like Thor's theme. So that it has this kind of very Lord of the Rings epic feel to the score, and it works well, especially the scenes on Asgard. Like, those scenes are really good. So for me, Thor's one of those. It's a very average Marvel film. It's a very average film that could have been a lot better. Like, there's a good film. There's a really good film in there somewhere. I just think it gets bogged down a little bit. It just gets bogged down just because of the characters and certain characters and certain storylines that are present in the film, and the Dutch angles. Again, I'm not going to go on this massive rant about Dutch angles, but look, they are a problem, man. Like, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, I can't stand them, and it's a shame, really, because this film does have a lot going for it, and it's just ruined by Dutch angles. That's the main problem I have, really, with this film, is the Dutch angles. I like the fish out of water stuff. That's all good. The action's really good in the film. Really good action. But apart from that, it is kind of just quite average, really. Not really much to say about it other than my passion against the Dutch angle. But apart from that, it's kind of average. It's all right. It's a decent watch. It's entertaining enough, and it's a decent film. Let's just say that about Thor. It's a decent film. Right, on to the next film, the second to last film now. God, I mean, this podcast is going for like over an hour at this point, so I'll probably get to around an hour and a half, maybe. But the next film we're going to talk about is Captain America: The First Avenger. This is another one of those films that a lot of people aren't that really hot about, but I like it. I really like Captain America: The First Avenger. This is similar to Iron Man, and I'll make this point about Captain America: The First Avenger. When I say it's similar to Iron Man, I don't mean in tone or anything like that. What I mean is it's very similar to Iron Man the way it's structured, if that makes sense. Very similar in the way it's structured, because you get the initial version of the character who then goes through something very, very significant in their life, and then they become more than what they ever thought they could be, completely changes them, and then they kind of have to fight the, evil version of themselves at the end of the film, right? A lot of action, heavy CGI action at the end of the film. So it's structured in a very similar way to Iron Man, which is a positive. Let's just get that right. It's a positive. Except from the third act. And the third act for me is the big problem with this film, because it ruins what is a brilliant film. Captain America: The First Avenger for the first two acts is the best film in the... No, I'll take that back. It's the second best film in Phase 1 of the MCU. It's the second best. Those first two acts are so good. Chris Evans is fantastic as Captain America. Let's just say that. I think he rivals Downey as far as like feeling like he's born to play this role. He embodies what this character is. He captures all those little essences about this character, and he makes the character so good. And he makes it an interesting character, but he's fantastic in this role. Like, make no mistake about it. Chris Evans in this film, and throughout his entire run in the MCU, he's fantastic. And in this film, apparently, even more so. He's really good in this film. The first two acts in this film, like I said, are fantastic. I think they're two of the best acts in any Marvel film you can get, especially the first act. A lot of people say it's slow and boring. I say it's character building. That's what it is. It's character building. And I think it's some of the best character building you can get. You get to know Steve Rogers before he becomes Captain America. You get to know everything about this character. In the space of half an hour, you get to know everything you need to know about who Steve Rogers is. He's someone who he's very unselfish, very brave, very confident despite his lack of physicality. He'll stand up for what's right. He has a good sense of right and wrong. Like the scientist says in the film, it enhances what's already there. So that's what makes Captain America such a good character, because it's already embracing what Steve Rogers already is. It doesn't change him. Like, it doesn't change what the character is. He's already that. Steve Rogers is already that before he becomes Captain America, but it's the icing on top of the cake, because now he's got the physicality to go along with all the other positive traits he has. You see his bravery. You see this kind of this fragility to him, even when he becomes normal Captain America, right? When he takes all the steroids and he becomes this juiced up monster, like, he's still that, this kind of wimpy, frail kid from Queens who will do anything to do the right thing. And that's what makes him such a compelling character. And Joe Johnson and Christopher Marks and Stephen McFeely, I think, do a brilliant job in conveying that. They do such a good job in conveying who this character is, and all the things that make him who he is, that make him one of the best characters in all the MCU. Even from this film, like I'm not talking about Winter Soldier and Civil War and the Avengers films. I'm just talking about from this film itself. Those first 2 acts do so much to set this character up. He really, I mean, if you've not watched it for a while, I'd go back and watch it because his performance is fantastic. Away from the performances, I just think this film is structured really well. It's written so well. They really make you care for all the characters in this film. The film has a very good tone. It's very it's very entertaining. It's not boring. I never find this film boring. People say that about Captain America: The First Avenger, that it's boring, right? And I think because for those first 2 acts, it doesn't have loads of action, right? It doesn't have loads of action. It doesn't have a load of, over choreographed fight scenes, and it's very slow. It's a slow burn, but it's through character building. If that character building weren't there, then I could get it, right? But the character building saves it, and it makes the film this engaging human story in a way. Something that we haven't really got since that first Iron Man film. And it really helps to make this character feel very important. So when we get to the Avengers and that character's built up so much, you kind of get that. You get that there. And it never feels like he's like a Boy Scout either. He never feels like a character that's just boring. Kind of like Superman-ish type of like, I'm all good and I've got no skeletons in my closet at all. Like, he's not that type of character. And I think Joe Johnston really does well in conveying that. He really has a good grasp on this character. And even though I love the Russo's take on Captain America, I do think that Joe Johnston gets not enough. He doesn't get enough praise for what he did with this film. All the action is really good in it in those first 2 acts. The limited action that is there is very good. The visual effects are outstanding as well. The visual effects to make Chris Evans smaller, like a lot of people probably just think they did it CGI, right? And it's not really that. What they basically did was got a body double, and they composited Chris Evans's performance onto the body double, which is fantastic, and you don't even recognise it. It's not like something that's noticeable. They blend it in so well, and it's done so well, and it's rendered so well that you don't even recognise. And that's why it's so jarring to see him when he gets so big, because it's like it means more, because it's believable. And that's what I'll say about this film. It's very believable. What you see, you really get invested in the story. You get invested in the characters. And not even just that, though. You get invested in the characters, like the character that the general that Tommy Lee Jones plays. You get invested in Hayley Atwell's character. You get invested in all these characters because of the way they're written, the way that they're directed, the way that they've been edited, the way that their stories have been told out over the course of the film. Even the villain, like Red Skull's really... Hugo Weaving's good in this film. Hugo Weaving's really good in this film. He has this complexity in a way because he has this kind of menacing... There's not a lot of sympathy there. And I think they probably play a little bit too heavy on the villain. Like, they make him too much a villain. And I think that's why he's not very compelling. Even though the performance is good, the look's good, the makeup's fantastic, the effects on him are fantastic, I just don't think they make him a good enough or well-rounded character. For me, the more interesting character is Armin Zola, played by Toby Jones. That's the more interesting villain in a way, because he's not just a mustache twirling I'm evil villain, right? He's more he's a villain that's kind of conflicted in a way. Like, he's very, even though he's a villain, he's still scared of the Red Skull, and it kind of keeps him on his toes a little bit, and you kind of wonder, like, is he conflicted about what he's doing? There's a lot that Toby brings to that character, and he's for me, he's the best villain in the film away from Red Skull. Maybe even more than the Red Skull, because at the end, really, the Red Skull just turns out to be an obstacle that Captain America has to overcome. He's more of a plot point just to get him to the point where he is at the end of the film, right? But I do like the Captain America, the first Avenger. I think it's a really good film. I think it's a film that's severely underrated. A film that I think is very underappreciated as well. I think people don't look at it for what it is. They see it as this kind of boring film, and it's not that at all. I think if you go back, rewatch it, give it a second chance, and watch it with different eyes. Watch it like you're watching like a war drama. Almost do that for those first 2 acts. See it as like a war drama, and then it kind of does come down in the third act, because similar to Iron Man in that sense, it doesn't need, this film doesn't need the big action set pieces. It doesn't need those overblown action set pieces. It doesn't need it, in a way. I think those are the worst parts of the film, because I don't think there's too many effects. There's too much there. Right, I think with a character like Captain America, which is what the Russos perfected, a character like Captain America works best in more realistic approach to action scenes. That character works better in those circumstances. I don't think he works well in big CGI action scenes, personally. I don't think that's what the character's really believable at, and he takes you out of the film a little bit. Not to say ruins the film. Again, similar to Iron Man, it doesn't ruin the film. I'm not saying that, but it isn't. It stops the film. It stops the film from ending on that note that you're like, that was fantastic all the way through. And I don't think it's like that. I think the third act's very average, where the first 2 acts are fantastic. So that kind of, that kind of gives that a little bit of context. I love the ending as well. The ending of Captain America, the First Avenger, is fantastic. That scene where he wakes up in the future and S.H.I.E.L.D. are kind of giving him this false kind of this false scenario that he's been like, he's in this hospital in like the 1930s, and he's really not. Like he's woke up and he's in present day, and then Nick Fury finds him in the middle of New York, and you see, and that line at the end, that I had a date line, right? And it just cuts to black. Such an effective ending. It's a really good film, more or less all the way through. It's a solid all the way through. First 2 acts are fantastic. The performances are really good. The effects are good for the most part, and I think it really does a lot to set the character up and help to continue this world going forward, right? Now, I'm excited to talk about this. Right. Now we get to the film that ends phase 1 of the MCU, and that film is The Avengers. The Avengers. And I love The Avengers. I love it because of how bad it is. That's going to sound so weird, but I love it for how bad it is. And what I mean by that is, this film is not well shot. It's not well lit. It's not well... Really, it's not really well written that much, really. Like, it's not really that well edited. But fuck, it's fun. Like, honestly. Joss Whedon does so good in this film through writing. And when I say writing, I mean dialogue. Through the dialogue in the film, through the performances of the actors, and through the action set pieces, this film is incredible. It's an experience, I think. I see this film as an experience. Like, I've got to say, most of the film, especially that first 20 minutes of the Avengers is awful. Like, and I'll still say that now. The first 20 minutes of the Avengers is shocking, right? The first 20 minutes of the Avengers is so bad. I can't even I can't put it into words at how bad it is. Like, it's awful. First 20 minutes of the Avengers is terrible. That scene where Loki comes into that that science base, and they're all there, and he comes through the portal and attacks like S.H.I.E.L.D., and then he has that escape. It looks like a cheap TV show. Like, it is filmed really bad, and it's lit really bad as well. That's one thing I'll say about this film. The lighting is shocking. The lighting is so flat. The editing, the colour correction, The grading, the color grading is awful. Like it really is. It's really bad. It's so flat. It looks like like a cheap TV show. But the performances are all really good. Robert Downey Jr. is incredible as Tony Stark. All the characters are really well thought out, except maybe Hawkeye isn't really well thought out. Hawkeye is crap. The character of Hawkeye is crap. He's a tool in a machine. He's there to get the plot along, right? That's what he's there for. I don't really love the character of Thor either, or Captain America in this film. I think the character of Captain America is so underdone from what he was in the first Avenger. He is very much. They don't have enough character moments in there for me. They don't have enough character moments in there. They play too much on the man out of time thing, right? And they use it for comedic effect rather than trying to play on the more emotional side of that, which some scenes were in there, but there was cut from the original cut of the film. So those scenes being in there, I think, would have done a lot to really make this character seem more than just this Boy Scout, bland, goody two-shoes type of character, right? Black Widow is interesting in the film. Loki's fantastic. Loki's such a good villain in this film. Like I said, in the Thor film, he was a little bit hit and miss. I don't think he was very menacing. And I think Joss Whedon plays on that. Like, he's not trying to make Loki menacing in this film. He's trying to make Loki seem like a slime ball, like a sleazy, sneaky, like childish menace in a way, and it works. Like, it works so well. Joss Whedon knows how to work with that character, and he does it so well. And I mean, Loki is kind of pathetic in a way, like, and this is why I like him more in this film, because they play on that more. They play on the fact that even though he's very powerful and all that, he's kind of pathetic. Like, even though he's a big test for the Avengers because of the type of character he is and his relationship to Thor, and he's got the control of the Mind Stone, right? What we later find out to be the Mind Stone in his staff. He's a lot better approached in this film than he was in Thor. The character of Thor is good, but I don't think, it's very much the same character as we got in Thor. A lot of the fish out of water things again, not really having that not really embracing the comedic side of Thor as good as they did later on. And I think it took them a while to get to that. But even so, Robert Downey Jr. is fantastic in the film. Sam Jackson's fantastic in the film. The action is incredible in the Avengers. It's incredible. The action in this film is unbelievable. And not because it's this ultra-realistic action, but they just play on it so well. They play on it is like a comic book come to life. It is like watching an animated show come to life. In a good way, not in a bad way. It's not that the visual effects are bad. The visual effects are incredible, by the way. Like the effects for Hulk, who is perfectly used in this film. This is the perfect version of Hulk. A character that's on the edge, has a little bit of levity to him, doesn't take himself too seriously, but he's that character that's always on the edge. Very like Ruffalo plays him perfectly in the Avengers. This is the best version of Ruffalo's Hulk that we ever get, I think. Maybe even more than Age of Ultron, in my opinion. And I liked him in Age of Ultron. I loved him in Age of Ultron, actually. But I love this kind of on the edge, nervous version of Banner because it contrasts so well with Hulk when he turns into the Hulk. And the effects for the Hulk are incredible. He looks real. Like, if you watch the Hulks in the later films, he looks like a CGI character. There's that kind of rubberiness to him, right? In this film, he looks like he has weight to him. When he moves, he looks heavy, but then again, very quick, like almost Brock Lesnar type, right? It's a weird comparison, but I think I hope you get that kind of what I'm trying to say there, right? Very big, very heavy, very forceful, but very quick and agile and powerful. And he's rendered brilliantly. The effects are fantastic. The way they use him just enough for it to not get boring as well. It's not like overblown with Hulk action. It's like when he's used, it's so entertaining. It gets you up and it gets you excited, right? So I love the Hulk in this film. And like I say, it's just fun. There's not really much I can say about the Avengers because you have to watch it to experience it, I think. It's more of an experience than a traditional film, in a way. The story in the Avengers is kind of crap, really. When you really stop and think about it, like, a god comes back from the dead looking for a magical cube, and then he tries to use the magical cube to, like get in between the Avengers and break them apart from the inside, and then bring an army down to destroy the world. Like, that's literally what the story is of the Avengers. It's not a complex story. There's not really much more to it than that. But the positives in the Avengers comes through from the action and the entertainment and the visual spectacle that it is, even though it's shot and lit like a TV show for a lot of the times, especially in the dialogue scenes. There is definitely just this sense of fun and enjoyment while you're watching it. Like, the best way to compare it is if you're just watching, if you had all your toys in front of you when you was a kid and you just played with them. That's what the Avengers is. It's a kid playing with his toys. That's what it is. All the other stuff, not great. Overall, as a film, I'd give like the Avengers, like, it's very average, really, as a film, but as a spectacle and as a piece of entertainment, it's one of the most entertaining things you can watch for most of it, except from that first 20 minutes. It's just a fun ride. It's like a roller coaster in a way. So yeah, that's my review for all the MCU Phase 1 films. If I was giving them each individual ratings, I'd give like Iron Man. I'll say like Iron Man's like an 8 out of 10. I'd say The Incredible Hulk's like a 5, maybe. Yeah, I'd say like the Hulk's like a 5 out of 10. Iron Man 2, I'd say, is like a 6 out of 10. Thor, I'd say, is about a 6 out of 10 as well. The first Avenger, I'd say, is like a 7.5 out of 10. And then the Avengers, as a story, traditional film, say it's like a 7, maybe. But as an overall piece of entertainment, I'd say it's like a 9, maybe. Like, it's a very high piece of entertainment. And it's a really good film to watch. All of them, in a way. All of Phase 1's interesting because all these films are set up for what we get more. Like, they help to set up things that we later learn later down the line, right? They introduce Thanos. They introduce the Infinity Stones. They introduce the core members of these characters, and and that's the strong point of that Phase 1 MCU, the Phase 1 MCU films, is that they make us care about the characters. And that's the main thing. If you don't care about the characters, then it doesn't matter how good the film is, right? If you don't care about the characters, the rest of the things, it's pointless. It's just window dressing. It's not important, really. It doesn't stay with you. And that's why these films, even though I'm not giving them massive ratings, because I don't think as films, except from maybe Iron Man and Captain America, I'd even say are like good films. They are marginally good at best, but the best things about them is their character building and the way they approach the characters and how they develop the characters and how they treat their characters with respect, and that's the best part about it. So overall, MCU Phase 1, a fantastic experience. If you've never watched the MCU, I definitely recommend doing it. Watch those Phase 1 films, get an experience, and you'll learn to kind of really grow with these characters and learn with these characters and go on almost like a journey with them, and then you get that, you know, that with the Avengers, right? You get that kind of culmination of everything that's been building up over these Phase 1 films. And I think, if anything, it's a credit to filmmaking in general. It's a credit to Kevin Feige and how he's managed to build and mould and create this world that before it had never really been done. I mean, we'd had crossovers before, right? We had like Freddy versus Jason, we had Alien versus Predator, we had all these films, but we never really had this like interconnected narrative storytelling between over the course of like 5-6 films, really since like ever. Really, it's so unique in a way. We've never really had anything like that. And the MCU is a pioneer in that sense. And Phase 1 is one of the main reasons why the MCU still is going very strong today. Because without those initial films, building these characters and building their motivation, building them and getting to know them, then later on they're not as important. We don't care about what happens in Endgame as much, right? We don't care about where these characters end up and the journeys that they go on. And Phase 1 sets up everything perfectly. They're all decent films in their own right. And, you know, some of them may aren't as important as others. Some of them have problems. Some of them have a lot of positives. But overall, as an experience, I think they're very, very good to watch. And I can't wait to talk about Phase 2. Phase 2... I'm really excited to talk about Phase 2 because I've got a lot to say about Phase 2. But that will come probably tomorrow, hopefully. If I can do a recording tomorrow, then that'll be it for tomorrow. So fingers crossed, keep posted for that. Make sure you subscribe on my YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so you always keep up to date with everything that I do on my YouTube channel. If you're listening on SoundCloud, please give me a follow on SoundCloud. Hit the like button on that. Share it around. And also on SoundCloud, if you'd like to donate to the show, there is a PayPal link on my main profile on my SoundCloud account. You can go over there, you can donate. It doesn't matter how much you can donate, 50p if you wanted to. Every little helps, just helps to keep the show going. Hopefully I can, any money I'll make, I'll probably just invest in the show anyway, get better equipment and everything like that. So if you like the content that I'm doing, if you want to donate to me on SoundCloud, then you're more than welcome to. You don't have to, like I said, it's completely up to you. I'm not telling you have to go and do these. It's your choice if you want to go and do that. If you're listening on Spotify, follow my Spotify. You can download all my podcasts on there as well, so you can listen to them while you're offline as well, which is really good. So yeah, guys, thank you for watching the video. Please like, share the video around. Get into a discussion in the comments. What do you think about the Marvel Phase 1 films? Are you looking forward to the future of the MCU as well? I'll talk about Phase 2 very soon. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you all very, very